Greetings, Guardsmen and Yeomen. Today we're going to be looking at a unit within the forces of New Antioch that has quickly become one of my favorites. And with the release of the official book for Trench Crusade, we'll have even more information on them. We'll be discussing, of course, of the Heavy Mechanized Infantry. The Heavy Mechanized Infantry is actually a new addition to the forces of New Antioch and the greater Faithful Nations. Coming out at the turn of the century, they are used as line breakers and mobile fortresses to support faithful operations. They are seen across every front and are used in a number of warbands. They are known to wield some of the heaviest weapons, biggest guns, and most advanced armor affordable to faithful infantry. The suits most commonly connected with the MHI is that of machine armor. Machine armor is based upon the ingenious divine-guided work of St. Methodist, who created the famed anchorite shrines. The machine armor is all but indestructible. Due to the properties of orichalcum alloyed steel, it can withstand a hail of bullets with ease and survive direct hits from all but the most powerful of enemy ordnances. The articulation of each suit is a masterpiece of craftsmanship and mechanical engineering, which allows the wearer to move with a surprising speed and range of motion, while sheltering from all but the heaviest of weapons. In the newer models, diesel motors and hydraulic pistons provide additional power to the wearer. And the armor is even capable of keeping the soldier upright even when struck by the most powerful of demonic weapons, be that demon-infused swords, Tartarus claws, or the sheer muscle power of demonic beasts. The HMI represent the pinnacle of metallurgical techniques conducted by the faithful forces, doing methods that we can only dream of today. Though this doesn't mean that in our own timeline during the Great War, armor wasn't experimented upon. In fact, it would be the Great War that we see the first armored suits produced in the modern era, as both sides rushed to try to answer the question of how best to get their forces across no man's land. When the war began, it was entirely a war of movement. Germany pushed heavily into Belgium and France, even getting as close as 5 miles outside the outskirts of Paris, though they would be quickly turned away at battles of the Marne and the frontiers, eventually retreating across the Seine River and beginning to place defenses. Both sides began to dig in, and by late 1914, the war of movement had ended, and trench warfare began. At the outset of conflict, neither faction really entered the war with any form of armor, outside of the occasional cavalry unit that still wore the cuirasses, though these were mostly for the ceremonial drill square and not the battlefield. And most of these cavalry units would forgo that armor and be equipped similar to their standard infantrymen, and any that did quickly found out how useless they were against rifle or machine gun fire. For the infantry, most were simply equipped with either their leather, cloth, or wool caps, with some of the extra facings even being cardboard. This even includes the famous German Pickelhaube. It was actually a leather cap, and provided almost no protection for the soldier outside of its steel spike. This spike is actually where the Pickelhaube gets its name, and was actually designed to defend against cavalry attack. The hope was, should a cavalryman charge down with his saber, it would be deflected off the spike and save the soldier's head. Clearly a relic of the 19th century and the prior wars that Germany fought in. No nation really developed their armor program until the horrendous losses of that first year became clear. This was particularly clear for France. France would enter the war with a uniform that was designed back in the 1850s under Napoleon III, used in Crimea and in the Franco-Prussian War. They literally entered World War I with a uniform akin to soldiers of the Civil War. With bright red pants and kepis designed to mirror the French flag, they were easily spotted by German artillery and machine gun units that tore into the French army. French losses were horrendous, with the Battle of the Frontiers numbering losses in the hundreds of thousands. These losses would finally convince the French High Command to adopt the New Model Uniform Program. The New Model Uniform Program conducted a number of improvements: better boots, a horizon blue camouflaged uniform, the use of puttees and more modern trench equipment, and finally the development of their own steel helmet, the Adrian. The Adrian helmet would actually be the first to be developed and to fully deploy to the front lines of the First World War. It outpaced the famous Stahlhelm by several months, and became the proof of concept for other nations, as it proved to be a very effective helmet design, saving many soldiers from shrapnel wounds. This is actually a big thing with helmets of the First World War. They were not designed to defend against actual rifle fire, but from the shrapnel of artillery, which was the main damage that soldiers suffered while serving in the trenches. And the Adrian would become ubiquitous with multiple Allied powers, particularly seeing service with Imperial Russia, the Kingdom of Italy, and Belgium. The Germans, for their part, actually developed the Stahlhelm before the Adrian, though they were slow to produce it and place it on the front. The first Stahlhelms would actually be seen at Verdun in 1916, and proved to be extremely effective. Its design is ubiquitous, and later on to inspire many of the modern-day helmets that we see. The Stahlhelm was designed out of a single piece of stamped steel, and was nicknamed the coal scuttle, as it looked like a coal bucket, though it was actually designed to mirror that of saddle helms seen throughout the medieval period. The Stahlhelm provided excellent neck protection for the soldier, and actually came with several quality of life enhancements that make the Stahlhelm probably one of the best designed armor pieces for the entirety of the Great War. It included air vents to provide better heat ventilation for the soldier. These vents were also used to attach additional armor plates, known as a Sturmpanzer, for machine gunners, snipers, and sentries. While these ventilation plugs were extremely useful, it didn't help the German soldiers' image, as propaganda artists quickly latched on to these plugs looked extremely like devil horns, a fact that was used extensively in propaganda art. They also came equipped with a specialized webbing that prevented the soldier's head from resting directly on the steel plate. This prevented any sort of head injury or concussion when impact is caused. The Stahlhelm was heavily exported to Central Powers countries, being seen in service with Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and Turkey. The British Empire also invented their own helmet design within 1915 as well, thanks to John L. Brodie, creating the famous Brodie helmet, or the Steel Helmet Mark I. Brodie based his designs off of the medieval kettle helm. A pretty common tactic for pretty much all World War I armor is to go back to medieval sources for inspiration. Much like the Stahlhelm, it was made out of a single piece of stamped steel, and became the most common helmet to the entirety of the British Empire and its forces. And in 1917, it'd be exported to the United States, where they'd make their own local variant known as the M1917. Within Trench Crusade, the Brodie/M1917 is probably the most common of the helmet designs, that we see outside of the medieval Sallet, though the Stahlhelm and possibly the Adrian will also make appearances. The forces of Free Prussia make heavy use of the Stahlhelm, though modified with a Pickelhaube spike. As far as the Adrian helms, the Catacombs of the Blessed Dead, their French soldiers are seen with Adrians, and probably across the Duchy of Novgorod, Romania, and other faithful nations, with how heavily exported the Adrian was. Not only do we have the helmets of the Mechanized Infantry, the Mechanized Infantry are in full-sized armor, requiring specialized alterations to the body and side to actually be able to wield the armor directly, due to its intensive weight. And this is very similar to when any nation attempted an armored suit for their soldiers in the Great War. And unlike in Trench Crusade, we do not have access to orichalcum or other materials to make the armor lighter and more easier to use. Some major examples would be breastplates, trench shields, and in some cases, full-size trench armor. There are several examples of heavy armor being used in the trenches, though most of the time you're looking at images of experimental American designs. Particularly, you can see the Brewster body shield. Created in 1918 by Guy Otis Brewster, it became the first effective body armor developed by the United States. While effective at stopping machine gun rounds, it was extremely cumbersome to use. I mean, simply looking at images, you can see why, being almost impossible for the soldier to actually aim and fire his rifle. Plus, with its weight of over 100 pounds, the soldier is not moving anywhere fast, which makes him just a sitting duck for those machine gun rounds. While the Brewster body shield proved ineffective, it did cause the American military to look more heavily into armor designs for their soldiers. And for this task, they turned to one man, Dr. Brashford Dean. Dr. Dean was a zoologist specializing in ichthyology, which is the study of fish and its fossils. And became the only person in history to hold concurrent positions at the American Museum of Natural History and the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where he was the honorary curator of Arms and Armor. Yes, this man studied fish and historical arms and armor of the medieval and modern age. Which honestly, badass. Always enjoy your hobbies, everybody. It's this work with the Arms and Armor Department that got him pegged to work with the United States military. And now Major Bradford Dean, along with the curation staff of the Arms and Armor Department, set to work to develop specialized helmets for American soldiers, where he makes several different helmet designs, most notably the number 5, which tried to combine the Brodie and the efforts of his earlier helmet designs, The model number 7, or Sentinel's helmet, which was designed only to be worn for short periods of time, and was directly based off an Italian armet helmet of the 15th century. Several examples were manufactured and sent to France for field testing, but despite proven ability to resist rifle fire, it was rejected due to its weight, being almost 13 pounds. Before he finally settled on the American model number 8, this is probably the most famous of the experimental armor-designed helmets, and was successful in providing overall protection to the face and head, while still allowing for good visibility and mobility. In addition, it was fairly light, being around 3 pounds. Dean refined the design to ensure that the helmet was well balanced and could be worn comfortably with its visor up or down. The Ford Motor Company, of all things, produced over 1,300 examples of this helmet. Though the war would end before anything beyond limited field testing could occur, Dean and his team also created fully functioning protection for the neck, torso, shoulders, arms, and legs, creating in effect a full-size body armor for the army. This was the first full body armor seen since the 17th century. While the armor proved highly effective, the war ended before anything past field testing could occur for this as well. Dean's work garnered a lot of support at the time, including from former President Theodore Roosevelt, who wrote to Dean in 1918 and expressed his personal admiration, quoted as saying, "Lord, how I wish I was half as useful. And man, I wish I was alive to meet this man, or at least be part of his team designing armor." He created a book called Helmets and Body Armor of the Modern Warfare, and honestly, go read that. Though these armor sets actually became quite famous in pop culture, being seen in games such as Battlefield 1, where it serves as every single armor set in the game for the Heavy class, and the supposed RDT armor. They're also used in variation in Trench Crusade with the Shock Troopers. A lot of their armor sets are heavily designed off of Dean's armor design. And in my opinion, we can also see that the HMI's helmet designs are heavily based on the Model 8. But it wasn't just the US developing armor. Probably the most famous armor actually in use during the war was that of the German trench armor known as the Sappenpanzer. This was mainly put in use for defense of machine gunners, sentries, and snipers, those who were meant to stand in one location for extended periods of time, as this was also extremely heavy, weighing about 25 to 30 pounds. And provided adequate protection against shrapnel, though it was uncertain against rifle fire and machine guns. It was also paired with the Stuhlpanzer, which was the added plate of armor protection for the Stahlhelm mentioned earlier. Designed and fielded in 1916, it became one of the few armor pieces to be mass-produced during the war. And by 1918, you even saw versions of the Sappenpanzer being worn by German stormtroopers and trench raiders. Though the Sappenpanzer was heavily maligned by the soldiers issued them, due to their weight and cumbersome design. This armor is actually more heavily used by the Heretical Legion troopers. The armor of the Mechanized Infantry is much more of the Entente powers, rather than that of the Central. We also have many instances of improvised armor. These would be designed by individual commanders and sometimes individual soldiers serving on the front lines, in order to provide more protection for themselves than the standard equipment their governments provided, and can include anything from just additional steel plates to even rudimentary ballistic vests. One interesting piece of improvised armor that even governments issued soldiers with is that of chainmail. Chainmail was actually used a lot more than you'd think in the First World War, particularly with vehicle crews. When the tank came out, one major issue was that of spalding. Spalding is pieces of metal that are shot off the armor of the tank or internal components when hit by a shell, and these can ricochet inside the vehicle and cause grievous injuries to eyes and face of crewmen. In order to combat this, they were issued a specialized mask, or in some cases made their own. These masks would be made with a mixture of leather and chainmail, and actually did provide good protection to the drivers and crewmen, though it did hamper their vision. And tank crews of both the American Expeditionary Force, the British Expeditionary Force, and the French did openly use these visors in combat. Though for British crewmen evacuating from their tanks, they had the unfortunate side effect of these helmets looking very similar to that of their German counterparts, meaning that many friendly fire instances occurred, eventually leading to these helmets being removed from the front lines. And this was not lost on infantry commanders as well. We do see several instances of specialized chainmail masks being made for infantry, particularly the Crew's visor. This would be developed by Captain Richard C. Cruz, the Surgeon Oculus Extraordinary to the King, and manufactured in large numbers between 1916 and 1917. and would be guaranteed to stop a 3-ounce shrapnel shell fired at a distance of over 100 yards. Attached to a rail inside the front rim of the helmet, the curtain could be drawn to one side to allow the wearer to sight his rifle, and could also be pulled back over the top of the helmet brim and clipped onto horn-like hooks to clear the field of vision entirely. Though many soldiers in the front lines found the chainmail to be an annoying distraction and removed it entirely. There's even many cases of soldiers reversing the helmet altogether and allowing the chainmail to drape over the back of their neck, providing extra protection to that area of the body, as the Brody helmet provided no neck protection. We even get some examples in Brashford Dean's Helmet and Body Armor in Modern Warfare, where he mentions that armorers up until 1908 were making chainmail shirts, and some occasions were even being used in the front lines of the Great War. While chainmail was sporadically used within our own timeline, within the timeline of Trench Crusade, chainmail proves to be extremely effective for frontline troops, and can be seen on everything from the Mechanized Heavy Infantry, shock troopers, down to just normal yeomen. As it should be reminded that melee combat is still a major part of the war, and chainmail is highly effective against swords and slashing attacks. Chainmail can also be made of orichalcum and better materials to be lighter, as one major issue to all body armor is that of weight. Weight has been a constant thorn in the side of armor manufacturers. You can add about as much defensive material as you want, but the more weight you add, the less the soldier is able to move in the suit. While yes, you can defend against a certain number of rifle and machine gun rounds, if your soldier is barely moving above 2 miles an hour and can dip, dive, duck, and dodge, he's going to be ripped in pieces before even making it halfway. Within Trench Crusade, the discovery of orichalcum sent from the Almighty himself has allowed for better armor protection for soldiers, hence the prevalence of medieval armor that we can see across the faithful nations. This makes armor and metals more flexible, durable, and lighter for the soldiers. Though this doesn't mean that it's completely a miracle and they can do whatever they want with it. With the example of the heavy mechanized infantry, it requires a strength and durability far beyond that of a normal soldier just to operate the suit. It's also extremely difficult to modify. Once the alloy is cooled down, there's no smelter powerful enough to actually modify the metal again. So they shape the shoulders instead. Orichalcum is expensive, while flesh is cheap. So let us look into the recruitments of these heavy mechanized soldiers, and how they are forged into these mighty warriors of faith. Recruitment for the heavy mechanized infantry starts at a young age. Across the nations of the faithful, there are orphanages set up for those who have lost parents during the war. And it is at these locations that Black Road monks of the Mendless Order travel tirelessly. There they test anyone willing to become a mechanized heavy infantry. There's never a lack of any volunteers, as heretical sea raids have destroyed entire coastal towns and filled orphanages and foster homes to the brim. Many of them would do anything to escape the monotony, hunger, and harsh discipline that comes in these institutions. Most of these recruits have lost families to the war and are eager to seek vengeance, a trait skillfully nurtured by official propaganda by the church. They also receive increased pay and the glory that comes with belonging to such an elite unit. No consideration is given to social rank, gender, ethnicity, or nationality. Only willingness, a sharp mind, and a body able to withstand the mentalist serums is required. Volunteers are tested for the reaction and tolerance to the chemical treatments and holy smoke that a soldier must withstand in order to grow strong and durable enough to be able to move in the machine armor, and endure the barrage of enemy fire that will cause most bones to fracture inside the suit, despite its incredible sturdiness. Most of these volunteers would fail these tests, displaying violent reactions to the slightest amounts of the blessed chemicals, and others do not possess the mind strong or sharp enough to operate their suits, and the advanced weapons they are given. But if they do, they achieve the rank of an aspirant, and they are moved into the care of the Order in windowless vans to begin their training. For those that fail, it is unknown what occurs, though this is most unlikely death, or at least horrible mental or physical scarring they can never hope to recover from. And if going off of the Order's treatment of failures to the communicant program, quite possibly chained in underground cloisters never to see the light of day again, because the Mendless Order can never fail. The creation of these volunteers into aspirants is not too dissimilar to creations of Space Marines or Spartans. As per the lore, it states that aspirants' bodies undergo rapid changes, Fast-twitching muscle fibers are grown in far higher proportion than usual. Bones grow denser and harder, though this often leads to unwanted skeletal protrusions and ridges. The chemical injections are carefully administered by the Mentalist Order. Unwanted growth in size is unwelcome, as the space within the armored suits is severely limited. Huge quantities of protein are fed to the youth to allow the chemicals and hormones to increase the density of their body. Heightened aggression is caused by the treatment, and has to be kept under careful control with holy smoke and opiate tinctures. Intense spiritual and technical learning sessions are interposed with physical and martial training. At the age of 18, they are usually physically ready for their duties. This should also be the time to remind everybody that holy smoke is the equivalent of meth pills. Yes, they're essentially giving these kids meth to better control them, along with copious religious propaganda. Maintaining the sanity of these soldiers is probably paramount for the Mentalist Order, as these aren't your normal communicants. They're meant to be full-fledged super soldiers, able to take orders and conduct operations within the fields on their own. Though these meth-addled super soldiers aren't ready to don their armor just yet. Aspirants are sent on long-distance patrols and trench-raiding missions to harden them in battle. On the front lines, they learn from veterans and experts in the use of all manner of weapons, from a humble trench knife to heavy machine guns. This period typically lasts for about a year, and by 19, the aspirant is either dead or a veteran of many battles, and are ready to don their designated type of machine armor. They rarely have to wait long for this, as while extremely formidable, the casualty rates are extremely high, and usually an aspirant dons their suit for the first time within weeks as their predecessor falls in the Great War. Though simply getting the aspirant in the suit is just another trial in becoming a heavy mechanized infantry, as modifying the suits is all but impossible due to their hardness and the demands of the war requiring quicker methods to get soldiers to the front lines. So when needed, aspirants' bones are broken and reset to fit the suits they had been given. Amputations are performed routinely to allow soldiers to wield some of the most deadliest weapons, where the recoil of the gun would shatter even the sturdiest of bones. New artificial limbs are then purchased from the fabled House of Wisdom of the Sultanate, and then attached to the stumps as they can withstand the rigors of machine armor warfare. These were particularly for those gifted with anti-material rifles or the heaviest of machine guns. From this moment of final trial, they are sent to join the heavy mechanized infantry, and from there they go to wherever the fighting is fiercest and where the missions are most critical. By age 21, should they survive, are usually decorated heroes, and at 30 they're considered such veterans that they are recalled to serve the household troops of the Duke himself. These units are equipped with experimental suits of wondrous flying machine armor. Yes, some of these suits even fly, though we unfortunately have no images of exactly how this looks. This is the same machine armor used by the ruler of New Antioch himself, and their banners and insignia are decorated with the device of the Holy Lance, the symbol of New Antioch, echoing the real-life relic mounted upon the Duke's great battle shield. When entering the suit, the wearer immediately adopts the name of the person who originally wore the suit. They forgo their birth names. This is what is known as a battle name. This tradition is both seen as a sign of respect for those who came before, and a way to disassociate the individual from the loss of their identity. The name they are born with is only recorded on their dog tags and used by their closest friends, who understand the isolation and loneliness that comes with becoming a member of the Mechanized Heavy Infantry. And when these soldiers eventually die, they are buried in a mass grave named for the original wearer of the suit, to join those who wore the armor before them. The Order of Remembrance carves the birth name of the fallen on bronze plates that are then stored carefully in a military chapel around faithful nations. Over the years, these collections have grown in gigantic vaults where they rest, forgotten and ignored as the Great War grinds on. Their names carved in bronze slowly being eaten away by time. Most machine armor suits are in continuous use, and when a member dies, they're simply washed out of the suit and it's hastily repaired for the next aspirant, as this carousel of death continues to move. Though there is one story out of the barracks of St. Michael of New Antioch. There, they say that Duke Constantine XI secretly dons a disguise and comes to the Great Chapel of Remembrance. There he reads the names of his personal household MHI troopers, who have fallen in battle, and prays for their deliverance. Perhaps this is just a story, one many soldiers tale to comfort each other, giving meaning to the ultimate sacrifice they are expected to make, as many die as unsung heroes. Now that we've gotten away with the recruitment and life of a mechanized infantry, what are their different types? We mentioned the flying variations, but there are actually several others depending on the weapons they use in the field. The suits of the mechanized heavy infantry are specially designed for their specific battlefield role and the weapons they are equipped with. The standard doctrine of New Antioch calls for the mechanized heavy infantry to use their heavy weapons in a fire support role in the advance, keeping enemy forces pinned down in their trenches and casemates, while shock troopers sweep the battlefield, being the first to hit the trench lines with their satchel charges and grenades, while also defending the mechanized heavy infantry forces, as they can be easily overwhelmed by countercharges by heretical troopers. This is the same for the Sosstruppen of Free Prussia as well, where the mechanized heavy infantry operate as the anvil, keeping the enemy forces pinned down as the wings of the eagle cross over the trenches and get behind enemy lines. For this role, the vast majority of mechanized heavy infantry are equipped with heavy machine guns. The ones that we can see in-game are heavily based off the Maxim machine gun. The Maxim is probably one of the most famous machine guns in history, going on to be heavily used by both sides in the First World War and inspiring many local variants, this being the MG08 of the Germans and the British Vickers gun. The Maxim also has an extensive service record, being used throughout First and Second World Wars, and even in some cases still being used in the modern day, being seen on the battlefields of Ukraine, being used by both the Ukrainians and the Russians. These weapons being able to fire continuously as long as they're kept cool and with ammunition, and can fire over 600 rounds a minute, and can be used in mainline assaults and in trench raids. There's actually specialized variations of the mechanized heavy infantry, where units are trained extensively in the use of close-quarters weapons, such as heavy shotguns and enormous melee weapons. These can include Beck-to-Corbins, warhammers, and even two-handed axes. Some of these units even carry heavy ballistic shields, made of alternating layers of emerald fiber mesh and thin sheets of orichalcum steel alloy. Nigh impenetrable, they are used as mobile cover when advancing under enemy fire. They also put the literal fear of God in any poor bastard stationed in those frontline trenches, because these assault detachments most oftenly act as the tip of the spear. And if I saw a near 10-foot tall superhuman break through my trench section, armed in near impenetrable armor and a massive fuck-off warhammer, I'd be praying to whatever demonic entity would hear me out, because I'm about to meet them in the next 10 seconds. These assault forces of the mechanized heavy infantry are probably the most commonly seen, unsurprisingly, in the Albia assault detachments, where they even have specialized axes and armor designed for this role, though you can see some of these assault forces being used in the Sosstruppen of Free Prussia. The troopers of the mechanized heavy infantry also rushed to the defense of New Antioch trench lines, using their machine guns and other heavy weapons to cut down swathes of heretical forces, operating as mobile gun platforms, and this is especially true with the forces of the Crown of England. With their need of defensive warfare, they developed their own variation of the suit known as the super heavy mechanized infantry armor. These suits are virtual walls with orichalcum, operating as mobile coastal defense batteries. There they hold the line and defend against heretical invasions, able to hold for extended periods of time, while the Crown's forces gather in sufficient numbers to repel the invaders. This fact is not lost on the Duke of New Antioch, who requests a permanent garrison of these forces to counter any breaches on the walls of the city. This comes in part of England's tithe to the city. These suits appear to be equipped with your standard trench shield from the assault detachments, and it also appears to be a 40mm Bofors cannon. The Bofors gun was more famous in World War II, and was mostly used as an anti-aircraft battery, seen on multiple ships across the US and British fleets, though it could be used in emergency situations as an anti-vehicle role, and if you wanted to, anti-personnel, meaning it's a very versatile weapon for your mobile coastal defense batteries. It appears these suits, along with several variations of the more normal mechanized infantry suit, operate in anti-tank roles as well. This is probably the one role that requires the most augmentation to the wearer of the suit, as if you're using the anti-tank roles, you're more than likely using the anti-material rifle common with the anti-tank communicants, as it's one of the few weapons known to pierce through armored hides of demons and the armored weapons that the heretic forces are using, along with other anti-tank weapons such as the aforementioned 40mm Bofors, and what also appears to be RPGs and grenade launchers, these grenade launchers appearing to be nothing more than a cobbled-together naval cannon. These forces are either inside the trench lines or go out in teams of 2 to go hunt down enemy armor before they can reach the firing step. And the exact opposite end of the scale to the super heavy battlesuit, you have the light machine armor. This light machine armor is only used with the forces of Trebizond. It is not entirely canon, as it's not official with Trench Crusade, though it's gotten the nod from Thomas Pearson and its creators as a fan project, so I'm going to go ahead and add it here, as it is a variation of the armor, and is probably the closest to canon that we're going to get. This light machine armor is actually an armor of necessity, as Trebizond is cut off from the rest of the faithful nations, and are unable to produce the same machine armor that we can see from other forces, nor access to the same chemical mixtures used to form the infantrymen themselves. While this prevents them from shrugging off the same wounds as the standard armor, and carrying the more heavier weapons, relying on more standard machine guns, flamethrowers, and grenade launchers, they are much faster than the more standard counterpart, able to operate as the tip of the spear in a light cavalry role, with many of these light mechanized units using satchel charges to run upon the enemy before chucking them into the trench lines. They're also capable of being wielded by standard infantrymen. Not relying on the chemical tinctures or specialized training for the more standard MHI troopers, these forces are able to be rapidly deployed to the battlefield, and in greater numbers, which is extremely helpful for the constrained populations of Trebizond. We also can see the heavy mechanized infantry of the Red Brigade. They seem to have taken the same blood oath as any pledge to the brigade, and it's actually quite interesting, as you wouldn't really expect members of the MHI to really do this, as they're needed for their own specialized missions. Though this is consistent with the ability of anybody from any station to join the brigade. When looking at the armor of their troopers, they appear to be much older marks than the standard issue infantry. Lacking many of the more mechanical bits, they look much more knight-like, with many suits coming with their own individualized helmets. This appears that many of the members of the HMI within the Red Brigade are honored veterans, having survived well past 30 years old, leading them to lives of loneliness and willingness to take the blood oath to join the brigade. They're also given the best weapons but currently available to New Antioch, as they provide heavy fire support to the rest of the blood pledges. And quite possibly a better sense of belonging as they join this merry band of misfits on their own personalized suicide missions. The final piece of mechanized heavy armor that we'll discuss here is that of the Maximilian class armor, and it's actually rather special, as it is only used by the Crusader Knight Orders, and has its origins lying in the Crusade of the 10,000. The Crusade of the 10,000 was a military pilgrimage made into the Levant based upon the dream of the Stylite monk Georgi, who was granted a vision of the Pillar of Life, and where to find the pieces of the Nephilim, and other major armor pieces that could better help the faithful nations. This was a major expedition combining the forces of several knightly orders, who sent out to find the location of the Holy Stylite. While the true accounts of the Crusade are unknown, as each of the Crusader Knights undertook a vow of silence to ensure that the truth of the matter would never be revealed, what is known is that, surprisingly for the world of Trench Crusade, it was rather successful, with the expedition returning with fragments of ancient armor, as well as extraordinary large bones found atop a great rock pillar, which Georgi had seen in his visions. The origins of the bones are subject to intense speculation and debate within the scientific communities of the faithful, with some saying they once belonged to the Nephilim, ancient titans created by the angels mentioned in the oldest surviving holy books. The people of the faithful nations regard this crusade in high regard. It is a popular subject of books and plays to this day. The one thing that is agreed upon is that these fragments represent a great boon to the faithful nations. And from these fragments, the artificers of the Order of the Aurelian Angelic Knights of St. George developed the blueprint for Maximilian-class armor, combining their immense bulk with the engine technology developed by the machine armor. And the one major difference between the Maximilian and the standard machine armor is that each one of these suits are bespoke. Standard machine armor is seldom modified, but the Maximilian-class suits and their weapons, due to their rarity, are modified when the previous wearer is killed or too badly wounded to continue their service. A careful process of testing and spiritual questioning by the church overseers determines which of the sword brethren is granted the honor of wearing the suit. The suit is then modified to fit its new wearer's fighting style, armaments, and assigned role in combat. Each suit has all sorts of customization, such as vermiculite layers that protect the wearer against flamethrowers, or a self-contained breathing apparatus that shields the Crusader Knights from gassed weapons. The Maximilian class is the heaviest personal protection used by the Crusader Knights, and sees extensive use in sieges and battles as it excels in confined spaces, where maneuverability is less important than extraordinary protection and devastating melee power. And they enter battle with specialized weapons unique to the Crusader orders, these being specialized halberds, polearms, swords, a specialized trench shield, and even long-range machine gun lances, reported to be able to pierce armored heretical vehicles. And we have come to the end of our discussion on the Mechanized Heavy Infantry, its different variations across the warbands, the weapons it wields, and what exactly is the armor, along with a little bit of history about what is armor in World War I. This is probably one of my favorite topics to really get into. I'm a big uniform and armor guy, as you probably can tell from all the past videos. So if you've made it this far, thank you for sticking around with me. And if you've made it this far, why not leave a like, comment, subscribe, all the good YouTube stuff for engagement. And thanks again for indulging a amateur historian's look into the history of our sci-fi and fantasy worlds. I'll be keeping up on videos every month, and definitely be getting into more social media stuff in the future. And thank you to all who've commented, liked, and shared these videos around. It just really makes me feel good that people are very much enjoying this content. So keep an eye on this space, and have a good night, day, or whatever. And you guys have a great one. I gotta get back to the archives.